Gnostic Schema of the Psychological Eye. Lecture by Samael Aun Weor, given in Mexico City. Several pseudo-esoteric schools emphasize the ridiculous idea of a double eye. They describe the first one as a superior eye. They call the second an inferior eye. We say that superior and inferior are two parts of one and the same thing. Much has been said about the alter ego, and it is even praised and deified as divine. In the name of truth, it is indispensable to say that the superior I and the inferior I are two aspects of the same ego, and therefore to praise the first and undervalue the second is without any doubt something incongruous. We make a correct differentiation between what the I is and what the being is. One could argue that such differentiation is no more than another concept expressed by the intellect. We rely on our own direct experiences. We know very well the diverse forms of intellectualization that exist, and that you have your circumventions, the desire to make everything that tastes like ego stand out. It is clear that the ego does not want to die, and that it wants to continue in some exquisitely subtle way. Yes, not in the dense and rough forms. No one likes to see his dear ego, his dear I, reduced to cosmic dust, just like that, because some guy said so in a conference hall. It is normal that the ego does not feel like dying and seeks out consoling philosophies that promise it a little corner in heaven, a place on the altars, or an afterlife full of infinite happiness. It is necessary for us to understand that in this world that we live in, everything passes, ideas pass, people and things pass. The only stable and permanent thing is the being. Question from disciple: Master, what substance are the psychic aggregates made of? Master's answer: the intellectual animal, mistakenly called man, does not yet possess an individual mind. He has not created it, he has not formed it. The mind, the manas, the mental substance, is devoid of individuality. It has various forms. It is made up in the form of psychic aggregates, which are not unknown to esoteric Buddhism. All these multiple quarrelsome and screaming I's, which together form the myself, are made up of more or less condensed mental substance. This is why we continuously change our mind. The I that swears eternal love to a woman is displaced tomorrow by another that has nothing to do with that oath, and then the person leaves, leaving the woman disillusioned. You see what the infinite forms of the mind are like, and how they control the main centers of the brain, and how they play with the human machine. Question from disciple: Master, on this planet the eyes make life bearable. If we dissolve them, wouldn't our life be very boring? Master's answer: authentic happiness lies in the revalorization of the being. It is unquestionable that each time the being goes through an intimate revalorization, he experiences authentic happiness. Unfortunately, we mistake pleasure for happiness, and savagely enjoy alcohol, drugs, adultery, games, etc. The extreme of pleasure is pain, and all forms of enjoyment are transformed into pain. Obviously, the elimination of the ego revalorizes the being, resulting in authentic happiness. Question from disciple: Master, is the formation of a mental body unpostponable in order to not have many minds? Master's answer: certainly, the intellectual animal does not have an individual mind. Instead of one mind, he has many minds. Creating the mental body and dissolving the ego is urgent when one wants the authentic revalorization of the being. Question from disciple: Master, is it possible that a person who gives money to the church, who reads the Bible, who does charitable works and other virtues has eyes? Master's answer: the eye disguises itself as a saint, as a martyr, a penitent, a good husband, etc. Many virtuous people possess psychic aggregates. Remember that there is much virtue in the wicked and much evil in the virtuous. Amidst the cadence and the perfumes of the temple, crime hides. The most abject criminals put on pious poses, portrayals of a martyr, etc. In the abyss there are many mystics and anchorites who believe that they are doing very well. Question from disciple: Master, what about the spiritual value of the good intentions of an honest person who lives erroneously? Master's answer: remember that the path that leads to the abyss is paved with good intentions. Many are called and few are chosen. The evil ones of all times have had very good intentions. Hitler, full of magnificent intentions, knocked down many towns and millions of people died because of him. The executioner who executes an unjust order, full of magnificent intentions, murders his fellow men. We must not forget the Holy Inquisition. At that time the inquisitors, with magnificent intentions, condemned many unfortunate ones to be burned at the stake, on the rack, etc. The important thing is the good deeds, and not the good intentions. It is the results that count. Good intentions are useless if the facts are disastrous. Question from disciple: what is the procedure to free oneself from the defects? Master's answer: it is urgent and unpostponable to analyze and annihilate the ego in a voluntary, conscious way. In dealing with people, the hidden defects surface spontaneously, and if we are in a state of alert perception, alert novelty, we see them as they are in themselves. A discovered defect must be subjected to analysis, to meditation, with the purpose of comprehending it. It is not enough to understand the defect, it is necessary to grasp its deep meaning. Any flash of consciousness can enlighten us and grasp, in thousandths of a second, the deep meaning of a defect. Elimination is different. Someone could have comprehended a defect and even penetrated its deep meaning and not eliminated it. This is indispensable in order to be free of defects. The personal ego is a sum of eyes. The intellectual animal is a machine controlled by eyes. These are the red demons mentioned in the Book of the Dead of ancient Egypt. It is indispensable to know that the only worthy thing that we carry within us is the essence. Unfortunately, this in itself is dispersed here, there, and everywhere, imprisoned in each of the different eyes. When trying to fundamentally understand any psychological defect, we must be honest with ourselves. Unfortunately, the mind always seeks excuses to justify the errors. It is necessary to self-explore in order to know ourselves profoundly. Any error is multifaceted and is processed in the 49 regions of the mind. Psychological gymnasium is indispensable, and this is life. In human interrelation, in coexistence with our fellow men, there are infinite possibilities for self-discovery. However, it is obvious that self-vigilance must always be done from moment to moment. The disillusion of the ego accelerates if we know how to make the most of the worst circumstances. These offer us the best opportunities. The control of the intimate defects is superficial and is condemned to failure. It is necessary to eliminate our defects. With this, we establish adequate foundations in our consciousness for the right way of acting. Comprehension is first, elimination is second. The thing that makes all children beautiful and adorable is their essence. This constitutes in itself their true reality. The normal growth of the essence takes place during the first 5 years. In order to keep growing, something very special must happen. This is the work on oneself. The development of the essence is only possible based on conscious works and voluntary sufferings. We must know that we have within ourselves that which is called ego, I, etc., and that the essence is bottled up within it, and this is lamentable. Dissolving the I is indispensable. This is the true meaning of the work on oneself, for we can never liberate the essence without previously disintegrating the psychological I's. As the psychic aggregates disintegrate, the essence is emancipated and grows harmoniously. It is unquestionable that when the psychological I dies, the essence shines. It gives us beauty and true happiness and the power that it possesses. The intellectual mammal does not have a defined individuality. This lack of individuality is the cause of so much bitterness. Our psychological body is a complete unit and works as an organic whole, unless it is sick. But the inner life of the humanoid is in no way a psychological unity. We lack psychological organization in the intimate depths of each one of us. The humanoid does not have a permanent I, but a multitude of different infrahuman and absurd I's. The poor intellectual animal is like a house in disorder, where instead of a master there are many servants who completely want to be in charge and to do what they feel like doing. The greatest error of pseudo-esotericism is to assume that one possesses an immutable and permanent I without a beginning or an end. If those who think like this were to awaken their consciousness for a moment, they could clearly see their own multiplicity. To think that if a person called Lewis is always the same is absurd. No person is always the same, because one constantly falls into contradictions and changes. When the I wants to continue here and in the afterlife, it deceives itself with the false concept of a divine and immortal I. None of us has a permanent I, and we do not even have legitimate individuality. If we consider that each I is a different person, we can emphatically ensure the following. Within each person who lives in this world, there are many persons. Each of these persons strives for supremacy, wants to be exclusive, and thinks it is the one and only, although it is only a small part. We can never know ourselves without self-observation. As long as an individual continues to consider himself as one, it is clear that any inner change is more than impossible. Reflecting a little on the various circumstances of life, it is well worth our while to seriously comprehend the basis on which we rest. One person rests on his status, another on money, etc. The most curious thing, whether we are wealthy or beggars, is that we need everyone, and we depend on each other, even if we are overinflated with pride. Within all this we think we are very strong, but we are frightfully weak. It is urgent to self-observe from moment to moment, with the purpose of clearly knowing the foundations on which we rest. When one discovers what bothers one most at a given moment, when he discovers the basis on which he rests psychologically, one is astonished before the spectacle of a fire. People desperate seize the most improbable things. People are attached to those things that do not have the slightest importance. This is equivalent to being in a state of absolute unconsciousness. What is most serious about our tragedy is that one thinks that he is thinking. One feels that he is feeling, when in reality it is someone else who at a given moment thinks with our tormented brain and feels with our aching heart. How many times do we think that we love, and what happens is that another I within us, full of lust, is using the heart center. As one works on oneself, one understands more and more the need to radically eliminate from one's inner nature everything that makes us so abominable. The worst circumstances of life, the most critical situations, the most difficult events are the most favourable for intimate self-discovery. If one, instead of losing one's head, identifying, being fascinated with the things of life, were to remember himself, he would discover with astonishment certain eyes, of which he never had the slightest idea or suspicion. The sense of intimate self-observation is atrophied in every human being. By self-observing oneself from moment to moment, this sense will develop progressively. As the sense of self-observation continues its development by means of continuous usage, we will become more and more capable of directly perceiving those eyes, about which we never had any data related to their existence. And we will discover that each of them has unmistakable psychological characteristics, through which we apprehend, we intuitively capture their intimate nature. In the beginning, the esotericist does not know where to start. He feels the need to work on himself, but he is completely disorientated. Taking advantage of the most difficult moments, the most adverse instants, we discover our salient defects, that we must disintegrate urgently. Before going to bed, it is advisable that we examine the events that occurred during the day. Let us remember that in esotericism, good is everything that is in its place. Bad is everything that is out of place. What would you say about a gentle and tolerant man blessing a gang of thieves who tried to rape his wife and daughters? What would you think of an accommodating man who in a given moment lends a dagger to a murderer? Crime disguises itself as a saint, uses the best virtues, presents itself as a martyr. Crime also hides within the perfume of prayer. To see such creations, to observe those monstrosities of hell, within which our own consciousness is bottled up, becomes possible with the progressive development of the sense of self-observation. As long as we have those aberrations inside, we will be an abomination, even if we think we are beautiful or just, and we even complain about the ingratitude of other people and cry out that they don't understand us. The sense of self-observation allows us to see clearly the I that we are dissolving, and the evident and determined results of the inner work. It is interesting to observe how such beasts are losing size and finally disintegrate, releasing the essence that was bottled up in that defect. All this implies naturally successive in-depth works, always continuous, because no I can ever be disintegrated instantaneously. As long as the psychological disintegration of all these abominations, ambitions, envy, etc. has not been done, even when we think we are honest, honourable, sincere, charitable, beautiful people on the inside, etc., obviously we will not be more than whitened sepulchres, beautiful on the outside, but full of disgusting rottenness on the inside. There are many people who assume that, by means of good intentions, it is possible to reach sanctification. Obviously, as long as psychological aggregates exist within us, underneath a pious look and a venerable face, there can be no sanctification. In revolutionary psychology, the need for a radical transformation is evident to us, and this is only possible by declaring to ourselves a ruthless and cruel war to the death. There is no real individuality in us, therefore it is impossible to have continuity of purposes. What a given I declares in an instant cannot be taken seriously due to the concrete fact that any I can declare exactly the opposite in any moment. The most serious is that there are people who emphatically declare They are always the same. The person himself is nothing more than a machine that serves as a vehicle for one I or another. Obviously, if one does not fight against life, the latter devours him, and true aspirants who do not allow themselves to be swallowed by life are rare. If we do not work on ourselves, we involute and degenerate, because it is not possible for the true man to arise by means of the mechanical evolutionary law, as this law has its counterpart, which is involution. One evolves up to a certain perfectly defined point, and then the involuting process comes. Any ascent is followed by a descent, and vice versa. Within the intellectual animal there are germs or seeds which, properly developed, turn us into true men. For this, an appropriate environment is needed, because it is well known that the seed does not germinate in a sterile environment, it gets lost. If we truly want to unite with the divine, we urgently need a true revolution of the consciousness. The revolution of the consciousness has three basic factors, which are the following: to die, to be born, to sacrifice for humanity. We are going to study what must die within us, what must be born, and why we must sacrifice ourselves for humanity, for others. It is urgent to know that the I is a bunch of entities that enjoys a certain degree of self-independence. These I's quarrel with each other, and the mind is the battlefield. Each one of them projects itself on the different levels of the mind, trying to satisfy its animal instincts, feeding on our vital principles. The I that today swears eternal love to a woman hates her tomorrow. Contradictions constantly arise within man. This is the reason why man is not yet a man, he is just an intellectual animal. The intellectual animal has no soul, his soul is divided. When the I dies, the soul is liberated, and that is when a man can have true continuity of purpose, a true permanent centre of consciousness. Only in a man with a soul, inner contradictions do not exist. Only where inner contradictions do not exist is there true inner peace. The psychological I stupidly wastes the psychic material in explosions of anger, greed, envy, lust, etc. Eliminating the I is a difficult task. The I is dissolved on the basis of rigorous comprehension. Coexistence with the fellow man, interacting with people, is the mirror where we can fully see ourselves. In interacting with people, our defects surface, and if we are vigilant then we see them. Every defect must first be analysed and then comprehended with the heart. When a defect is comprehended in all levels of the mind, its corresponding elementary is disintegrated, which means a small I dies. Every time a defect dies, something new is born, a virtue, a power of the soul, a truth, etc. It is urgent to undergo mystical death. It is necessary to fabricate the soul. It is indispensable to sacrifice ourselves for humanity. We must give our lives for our fellow men. The psychological I had a beginning, and therefore it also has an end. Pain is the result of our own mistakes. When one makes a mistake, the result is pain. We make mistakes because we are imperfect. We are imperfect because we have the I inside us. When the I disappears, true and authentic happiness comes to us.